Now you'll know how to show off with your salary." Those words from my mom cut into me like a knife. I was standing there, clutching my phone, staring at the screen as her voice echoed in my head. My bank app showed a balance of 0. Just yesterday, it held $14,000. Every single cent earned through late nights, endless overtime, and sacrifices no one ever saw. I had saved that money to finally take a step toward freedom, to rent my own place, to escape the suffocating grip of her control. But instead, all I got was her mocking laughter over the phone. "Let's see how independent you are now." She didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. My mom had always found a way to turn my joy into her victory. This wasn't the first time she had clawed into my life as if it were her personal bank account. But this time was different. This time was the last straw. And as I stared at that empty balance, I realized something I had never dared admit before. There was no going back. I grew up knowing my mom valued appearances more than anything else. She liked to parade me around in dresses she chose, with hairstyles she approved of, so neighbors would whisper about how perfect her daughter looked. But what no one saw was the way she would snap at me if I so much as frowned, the way she called me ungrateful if I dared to spend money on myself. Every dollar I earned from babysitting at 15, from cashier shifts at 17, from internships in college, she demanded a cut. At first, it was small. "Just for groceries," she said. Later, it was, "because you live under my roof." But once I graduated and started working full-time, I thought it would stop. I was wrong. The more I earned, the more she acted like it was hers to manage. She'd ask for my banking login, claiming it was for emergencies. I was naive enough to give it to her. And yesterday, that naivety cost me $14,000. My rent fund, my freedom fund, gone in seconds. And the worst part? She didn't even apologize. She wanted me to suffer. She wanted me dependent. And I realized in that moment, if I didn't break this cycle now, she would drain not just my money, but every last piece of me. I remember when I first started that job at 23, barely making enough to cover bills. I worked long hours, in a cubicle that smelled like burnt coffee and paper toner, answering emails until my eyes blurred. My paycheck wasn't much, but it was mine. I promised myself I'd build something. Slowly, brick by brick. I skipped dinners out, skipped vacations, skipped new clothes. While my friends posted beach photos, I stayed late at the office and walked home in the dark, saving every dollar I could. And month after month, I watched that account grow until it finally reached $14,000. It wasn't just money, it was proof that I could survive without her. Proof I wasn't the helpless little girl she still treated me as. But my mom never saw my savings as independence. She saw them as an insult. In her world, any success I had was a challenge to her authority. She thrived on control. She wanted me to come begging, to admit I couldn't make it without her. And when she drained my account, I realized she didn't just want to humiliate me. She wanted to own me forever. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the bank notification over and over, replaying her voice. The rage inside me was like nothing I'd ever felt. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt this cold clarity. If she thought she could erase years of my sacrifice with a single withdrawal, she was wrong. Because this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. This time, I was going to make her understand exactly what she had destroyed. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen, and she was already there sipping coffee like nothing had happened. She looked me up and down and smirked. "You should thank me. At least now you won't waste it on some silly apartment or clothes you don't need." I put it somewhere safe. My hands shook, but I forced myself to stay calm. I knew if I snapped, she'd twist it back on me, accuse me of being dramatic, ungrateful, disrespectful. That was her favorite game. "Somewhere safe," I repeated, my voice flat. She didn't even blink. "Yes, family comes first, and I had bills to pay. You'll get over it." Just like that. $14,000 reduced to a shrug and a justification. I stared at her across the table and realized she saw me as nothing more than her personal ATM, her safety net. Every late night I worked, every sacrifice I made, she had erased with the click of a button. And she expected me to swallow it quietly, like I always had. That's when the switch flipped inside me. I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't under her roof out of weakness. I was here because I had been saving to leave. And now she had burned that bridge. But she underestimated me. She thought stealing my money meant stealing my power. She had no idea that she'd just lit the fire that would finally push me out for good. That morning, as she sipped her coffee in victory, I silently made a promise. This was the last time she would ever control me. I went to work that day pretending nothing had happened, but inside, I was replaying every single choice I had made. In the last 5 years, every overtime shift, every holiday I spent at my desk instead of with friends, every cup of instant noodles eaten so I could save just a little more. 14,000 wasn't just a number, it was years of discipline, of me proving to myself that I could make it on my own. And she had gutted it without a second thought. That night, I dug through my old folders and found the bank statements, the withdrawal alerts, and even the text message from her bragging, "Now you'll know how to show off with your salary." I screenshotted everything, emailed copies to myself, even printed them out. For once, I wasn't going to let her spin the story so I looked crazy. I was tired of being the daughter who just forgave because she was family. I thought about how many times she'd done this in smaller ways, taking my birthday money for the household, opening my mail, signing me up for loans in my name when I was barely 18. She always called it help, but help doesn't leave scars like this. As I stared at the stack of evidence on my desk, I realized I had enough proof to show anyone exactly what she'd done. And for the first time in my life, the fear of standing up to her was smaller than the rage burning in me. She thought I was powerless, but I was about to prove just how wrong she was. I started digging deeper than I ever had before. My mother had always been careless with her gloating, always bragging about what she'd managed to pull off, never thinking I'd put the pieces together. She had siphoned money from me before, small amounts I never noticed right away. 20 here, 50 there, but this time she got greedy. 14,000 wasn't just carelessness, it was arrogance. I pulled up my email history and sure enough, I found the old messages from the bank, the ones that notified me of password resets. They all matched the times she had claimed she needed my card for groceries or when she insisted she was just checking on my bills. My jaw tightened as I scrolled through, realizing she had been planning this longer than I thought. She didn't just wake up and decide to empty me out. She had been building to it, waiting until the amount was worth taking in one blow. I felt sick. Not because of the money itself, but because it proved what I had been too afraid to admit. She didn't love me in the way a mother should. She loved control. She loved the power of holding my future in her hands. She loved watching me scramble while she stood back with that smug look, daring me to fight back. I remember one night when I was 17, coming home from a shift at the diner with $80 in tips stuffed in my pocket. I was exhausted, but I was proud. It was the first time I had paid for my textbooks without asking her. She took the bills straight out of my hand before I could even put them away, saying, "You live under my roof, don't you? Rent's due." I laughed back then, thinking it was a joke, but she never gave the money back. That same pattern kept repeating, just on bigger scales. A birthday check from my grandmother, gone before I even saw it. A scholarship refund check from college. "I'll manage it better for you," she said, depositing it in her account. And each time I told myself I would be smarter, that I would find a way to guard what was mine. But no matter what locks I put in place, she always found the key. Because deep down, I still wanted to believe she cared for me enough to stop. But staring at the cold, flat zero balance on my phone now, I knew she never would. She wasn't going to stop until there was nothing left of me. No money, no spirit, no freedom. She was addicted to the rush of taking from me, of proving I was still her child to discipline. That night, sitting alone in my apartment room with the stack of statements in front of me, I felt the shift in my bones. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about dignity, about reclaiming every piece of myself she had stolen. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I started making calls to the bank, to HR at my job to confirm direct deposits couldn't be rerouted, to an attorney who had once helped a coworker with wage theft. I explained everything in detail, every screenshot, every note, every suspicious withdrawal. And for the first time, I wasn't treated like a silly daughter overreacting. I was treated like a woman who had been robbed. The attorney told me, calmly, If what you're saying is true, this isn't just a family matter. It's theft. It's fraud. You need to protect yourself. Those words ignited something inside me. Fraud, theft, not a misunderstanding, not family business, not help. Real crimes, with real consequences. My whole life she had hidden behind the mask of motherhood, knowing no one would question her intentions. But the moment I heard a professional call it by its real name, everything shifted. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I was a victim, and I had rights. I sat there long into the night, printing, highlighting, organizing. I could hear her laughter in my head, that sharp, mocking tone. But this time it didn't scare me. It fueled me. Because she thought she had ended my independence, but all she had done was push me into the one thing she never expected, fighting back. And as I taped each piece of evidence into a neat folder, I made another promise to myself. If she wanted a war for control, then I was ready. But this time, the rules would be mine. When I finally confronted her, it wasn't with shouting or begging. It was with silence. I walked into the living room holding the folder, laid it down on the coffee table, and slid it toward her without a word. She smirked, at first thinking it was another one of my temper tantrums, as she always called them. But then her eyes flicked over the pages, screenshots of transfers, bank alerts, timestamps that matched her own late-night logins. For the first time in years, I saw her face falter. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice sharper, now stripped of the smugness. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She flipped page after page, her breathing growing heavier, and I watched the realization creep in that this time she couldn't spin it away, couldn't reduce it to me being too sensitive. Finally, she slammed the folder shut and snapped, "You wouldn't dare take this anywhere. I'm your mother." Those words should have stung. They should have tethered me back into that old guilt. But instead, they set me free. Because in that moment, I saw the truth. Being my mother didn't give her the right to bleed me dry. She leaned back and tried again, softer this time, her voice syrupy. "We're family. We help each other. You'll get more money. It's not the end of the world." But it was the end of something, the end of her grip on me. I stood up slowly, and in the calmest voice I had ever managed with her, I said, "You stole from me $14,000, and I'm done pretending it's anything else." She tried to laugh, but her voice cracked. I didn't raise mine. I didn't let her bait me into the old script. I simply picked up the folder and walked out the door. She shouted after me, a mix of threats and pleas, but I didn't stop. My hands were steady on the steering wheel as I drove to the attorney's office the next morning, dropping the folder on his desk. The weeks that followed were a blur of phone, calls, official letters, and frozen accounts. She fought, of course, spewing venom about how ungrateful I was, how I was destroying the family. She called relatives, crying about how her selfish daughter was trying to put her own mother in jail. But the difference this time was, I had evidence. Cold, irrefutable evidence. And I had finally shed the weight of shame that kept me silent all those years. The bank sided with me. The lawyer told me her actions fell under financial abuse and fraud. For once, the story wasn't hers to control, and as the consequences began to unfold, her credit frozen, her name flagged for investigation, her access to my life cut off, I realized something. I didn't need to scream or break down or beg her to understand. My revenge was in the documentation, the boundaries, the distance I carved for myself. She thought she had drained me dry, but in reality, she had handed me the proof I needed to walk away forever. And I did. With my head high, my accounts locked, and my freedom finally secured, the calls started first. Relentless, angry voicemails about how I was a traitor, how no real daughter would treat her own mother this way. Then came the softer ones, dripping with fake tears. "I only did it to protect you. Don't ruin my life over a mistake." I saved every single one of them. Each voicemail was another nail in the coffin of the illusion I had lived under my whole life. And while she spun her story to relatives, painting me as the cold-hearted child who abandoned family, I stayed quiet. Silence was my power now. Instead of defending myself to people who would never see past her act, I focused on building the life she tried to stop me from having. I opened a new account at a bank she didn't know existed. I changed every password, every PIN, every lock she had ever touched. For the first time since I was 15, my finances belonged to me alone. It felt strange at first, not to glance over my shoulder, not to anticipate her finding a way in. But slowly, freedom started to feel natural. I rented a small studio apartment with white walls and a squeaky floor. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every dollar I spent was my decision, and every meal I cooked tasted better simply because no one could take it away from me. Meanwhile, the lawyer kept me updated on the investigation. My mother's withdrawals, her signatures, her access. To my account without consent, it was all being reviewed. There was even talk of pressing formal charges. When I heard that, I felt a pang of something I didn't expect. Grief. Not for her, but for the relationship I had always wished we had and now knew never existed. The mother who should have guided me, protected me, celebrated my independence. That mother wasn't real. The woman in my life had only ever seen me as leverage, as a resource to drain. Letting go of that fantasy hurt more than losing the money ever did, but in the space left behind, something new grew. Strength, clarity, the certainty that I didn't need her approval to live fully. And as she flailed, cut off from my income, from her easy access to my life, I thrived. My revenge wasn't about watching her collapse. It was about rising in spite of her. And every step forward, every paycheck untouched by her hands, every bill I paid on my own, it all became a declaration. I am free. I am not your safety net. I will never be your victim again. The day the official letter arrived at her house, she called me 23 times in a row. I didn't pick up. Later, I listened to the voicemails in order, first denial, then rage, then panic. You can't do this to me. I'm your mother. You'll regret this when I'm gone. Please, don't let them take everything. I'll give you the money back. I promise. That last one made me pause. It wasn't remorse. It was fear. Fear of losing her grip. Fear of facing consequences she thought she was too clever to ever touch her. For the first time, she wasn't the one holding the power. Relatives called too, parroting her side of the story, telling me blood was thicker than water, that family always forgives. But I kept asking them the same question. If someone stole $14,000 from you, would you just forgive them because of their last name? Silence always followed. Some hung up, some muttered excuses. None of them had an answer, because deep down, they knew what she did wasn't family. It was theft. And I was done dressing up theft as love. In my new apartment, the nights were quiet. Sometimes too quiet. I would lie awake, hearing the echoes of her voice in my head, the constant criticism, the belittling remarks. It took time to unlearn the reflex of flinching when my phone buzzed, to stop expecting the next disaster to come from her hands. But slowly, I felt the weight lifting. I decorated the walls with photos I had chosen, not the ones she approved. I cooked dinners at midnight just because I could. I laughed louder, freer, without waiting for someone to scold me for being too much. The investigation crawled forward, as these things always do, but I didn't care how long it took. The Murbot. Simple fact that her actions were being scrutinized, that there was a paper trail she couldn't deny, was enough. Whether she ended up paying restitution, facing probation, or simply living under the stain of being exposed, it was no longer my burden to carry. I had handed it off to the system, to the law, to something bigger than her manipulation. My job was just to keep walking forward, and with each step, I realized the greatest revenge wasn't the lawyer's letters, or the frozen accounts, or even the possibility of charges. It was me waking up each morning in a life she no longer controlled. It was the smile I wore when I checked my bank balance and knew every dollar in it was safe. It was the peace that came from finally saying, she doesn't own me, not anymore, not ever again. Months passed, and with them, the distance between us grew into something unbridgeable. At first, she tried to keep up the performance, calling on birthdays, sending sarcastic little messages like, "Hope you're doing well with all your independence." But I didn't answer. Silence became my shield, and I could tell it cut her deeper than any argument ever had. The woman who once thrived on my reactions, who fed on my outrage and guilt, was now met with nothing but stillness. And that silence forced her to face herself, something she had avoided her entire life. I heard through the grapevine that she started struggling. Her credit card applications kept getting denied, and some bills went unpaid. She had built her lifestyle around my contributions, and without me as her secret bank, her walls began to crumble. For years, she had worn the mask of a successful, self-sacrificing mother, the woman who gave everything to her daughter. Now, that mask was slipping in front of everyone. Relatives who once scolded me for standing my ground started calling her instead, asking why her finances were falling apart. She had no answer, because the truth was simple. She had lived off me. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I poured myself into my work, earning a promotion within 6 months. My new paycheck wasn't just higher, it was untouchable. I started a small savings account again, watching the balance climb without fear of it being drained overnight. I even enrolled in a course I had put off for years, something she always mocked as a waste of money. For the first time, I wasn't building a life just to prove her wrong. I was building it because it was mine to build. The freedom was intoxicating. I bought secondhand furniture, repainted my tiny studio, and turned it into a sanctuary. Each piece was chosen by me, for me, and every corner of that room whispered the same truth. I had taken my life back, but the emotional scars were harder to heal. There were nights when I still woke up with the echo of her voice in my ears, telling me I was worthless without her. Old habits died slowly. I still double-checked locks, still hid receipts, still hesitated before making decisions, as if waiting for her approval. Healing wasn't a switch. It was a slow climb, one shaky step at a time. And yet, every time I caught myself hesitating, I reminded myself, she no longer had the power to say no. That voice in my head wasn't mine, it was hers. And I was done letting her live rent-free in my mind. The lawyer called one afternoon, with the update I had secretly been waiting for. A settlement was likely. She wouldn't be going to prison, but she would have to pay restitution in installments, her accounts monitored for fraud. He asked if I wanted to push further, to demand harsher consequences. For a moment, I considered it. God, I wanted her to feel the full weight of everything she had stolen from me. But then, I thought about what revenge really meant. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about reclaiming my life. And I already had. Her money, her lies, her manipulations, they no longer defined me. Whether she paid every cent back or not, she had already lost the one thing she treasured most: control. When I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my little apartment and let the reality sink in. I wasn't her prisoner anymore. I wasn't her piggy bank, her scapegoat, her puppet. I was free, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring, because tomorrow was mine, and she could never take it again. The last time I saw her was unremarkable, almost anticlimactic. She showed up at my building unannounced, standing in the lobby with that familiar mix of defiance and desperation in her eyes. For a moment, I felt like a child again, half expecting her to bark orders or demand my keys. But when I looked closer, I saw something else: exhaustion. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes not as polished as she once kept them. She asked to come up and talk, but I shook my head, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. I had nothing left to give her, not money, not apologies, not excuses. She begged, she pleaded, her voice cracking, "We're family, you can't just erase me." And for the first time, I answered without trembling. "I'm not erasing you. I'm saving myself." Her face hardened, like stone shattering into dust, and she turned away without another word. Watching her walk out the glass doors, I knew that was the true end. Not the drained account, not the lawyer's letters, but this moment where she realized her grip on me was gone forever. In the months that followed, life didn't suddenly become perfect. Bills still piled up, work was still stressful, and loneliness sometimes crept in at night. But every challenge was mine to face, on my terms. And that made all the difference. I rebuilt my savings slowly, savoring each deposit like a private victory. I filled my apartment with laughter, friends over for wine nights, late dinners, weekends free of guilt. I stopped shrinking myself to make room for her ego and started living in full color. I even began therapy, something she used to scoff at as a waste of money. And in those sessions, I learned just how deep her control had gone, how much of my identity had been shaped by her manipulation. Piece by piece, I took myself back. And then came the day I checked my account and saw a restitution payment. Small, just a fraction of what she owed. But I didn't feel anger. I didn't even care about the number. Because that deposit wasn't money, it was proof. Proof that she was being held accountable, that she could no longer steal without consequence, that the balance of power had shifted for good. It was the final confirmation that I had won. My revenge hadn't come from screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. It had come from silence, from boundaries, from walking away and never looking back. Now, when people ask about my family, I smile softly and tell them the truth. Sometimes family isn't blood, it's choice. And I've chosen myself. I've chosen freedom, dignity, and peace over cycles of abuse. Do I miss the idea of having a mother who protected me? Yes, but I no longer confuse missing an idea with needing the person who destroyed it. The greatest lesson I learned is that love without respect isn't love at all. It's control dressed up as care. And I will never fall for that disguise again. So here I stand, stronger than I ever thought I could be. Not because she gave me strength, but because she tried to take everything from me, and I refused to let her win. Family is not a license to wound, and being a daughter does not mean being a victim. My revenge was simple. I survived her. I built a life beyond her, and I will never allow her to own even a single piece of me again. Tell me, did I go too far or not far enough?